what's your opinion on that? I've heard mixed.
Yeah, I know
Third
you've
hand
heard, I know you've
stories.
heard mixed. I got thrown under the bus on that thing.
That's why I keep, by the way, this up here.
Good, thank you.
Those that-
Here, let me put it over my head.
Get thrown under the bus. I understand. I've been there before, so that's
You know,
what I wanted to clear.
I happen to have been, I'd been on the Hotel Motel Association board for many, many years. The board, that organization disbanded during COVID because hotels couldn't pay dues and all that. The Iowa Restaurant Association then came and said, hey, what if we took over the Hotel Motel Association, which they did. Craig Walter, you may know Craig, he's a Clive resident. He actually managed that for many, many years. So the restaurant took it over, formed their own hotel lodging association. I was on their initial board. When this thing hit, I was bombarded by a particular elected official in the metro, really blaming me for this. And I had nothing to do with it. I immediately dropped off the board. I discussed things with my executive board, but we never even took it to the full board. An opinion like that, I don't have an opinion because I may have a personal opinion, but that has to come through my board. That's why we have boards of directors to give us direction. So
Great. And so your board hasn't discussed if that's to come up. I don't have an opinion either, really, right? I don't. I just think maybe there needs to be a solution for DART, maybe not. Whether it be legislative or other solutions, like budget management and things. But again, I wanted you to be able to air your
yeah, I
side of this
appreciate that.
because I've heard so many.
Yeah, I know there's
stories.
big concern. I know all, especially the suburban areas that are asked to put money in, you know, I know that's big concern. And, you know, I guess it goes back to the people too. If in fact the legislature passes something, even a hotel motel tax, it's still my understanding it's got to go back to a referendum vote to get approval. So, you know, I guess the people in the long run will decide.
Yeah, I think it was pushed last year heavily. And I think that's where the mixed stories came from, where maybe CVB was sitting in the lobby inside. And
Never spoke to their lobbyist, and our lobbyist, I talked to him a lot saying, hey, protect me. And I have some friends up there too that that knew I had nothing to do with it. So
no, I appreciate you. And I wanted you to have an opportunity to air that.
Thanks for asking. I knew you were on the DART board. So
yeah, so it's good to be able to say that. Again, this board hasn't discussed it either. Personally, I'm not so sure I'm in favor of it. But again, that's a whole discussion of the entire board here. My last thing, Greg, is if I could ask one personal favor from you before the basketball tournament. And it is huge. It is huge. And it's a great event and you all have done very well. But if you and I could work directly with the NCAA and Event Center in Drake to ban Ted Weaver from wearing his ridiculous striped outfit downtown.
It looked good.
I'd appreciate that. Or at
I wanna
least that
see
he
it. I
doesn't
think we
sit
should
by
let
me
him
again.
Just make sure Indiana gets assigned here and we'll all be
And if
good.
he does sit by
I
me.
have no problem supporting that issue.
Come on, Greg.
But again, I don't have a vote on that.
That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Susan.
I serve on the Polk County Housing Homeless Coordinating Council. And I'm glad you brought up the skywalks. It's a touchy issue, but it is concerning. And it's something that the communities collectively are looking to try to deal with. But I've wondered about some of the high school tournaments coming up and if we shouldn't be having some better patrolling through there.
We're doing the same
Is
thing.
that happening for that?
We
too?
actually are paying for police to be in the skywalks because we had some issues last year. And yeah, that's the last thing we want is kids or parents or anybody being frightened to be in Des Moines, Iowa, you know, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, thanks for your attention to that. And it is not going unnoticed, but we don't have all the answers, do we?
No.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just
Srikant.
follow up on what Michael said. I know you said that your board hasn't discussed that kind of DART hotel motel tax piece. Is that something you guys have on your agenda at all? Or can you talk about that a little bit?
Not really. I mean, it's not really our issue. I mean, we could bring it up. If Eric or somebody wants to bring it up, they can. I mean, and our exec board was aware of these text messages I was receiving and all that kind of stuff, but it could certainly be brought up if it became an issue. Yeah. I mean, we don't hide anything.
Yeah.
You know, our board's made up, 15 of our board members are elected officials, so they kind of got the private sector overruled anyway.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Mayor Edwards, I think we've got Councilman Klein now.
Are we sure?
I'm not making any bets on predictions when it comes to Zoom, but we've been working hard here. Councilman Klein, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Did you want to say something, Eric?
Not particularly, other than Greg, thanks again for coming to the council. We appreciate you and your staff's fine work with Catch Des Moines and the awesome results I think we've all seen. I'm not ready to bring that DART issue to the board to address that previous comment. But again, appreciate everything that you and your staff do.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. I think that's all we have this evening.
All
Thanks
right,
for coming.
thank you.
We appreciate it.
And I will put a plug in for the MetroNet Mafia that's here. I love their service.
Very good. All right.
Oh, wait, that's my opinion, not the opinion of the board.
Fair.
Well, Matt, do you want to do introductions here?
Yeah, because I know we'll switch out presentation as well. Craig Zinnerman and his crew is here tonight. I've requested them to come before you to provide an update on the construction project of their citywide fiber to the home and to the direct to the business project that I know this council discussed quite a bit of time about 2 years ago. We're in the midst of that construction, and I've asked them to provide an update and kind of where they're at and what time what work they have left to complete the project here in Clive. So with that, I'll turn it over to Craig.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Yes, my name is Craig Zimmerman, and I'm the Government Affairs Manager for MetroNet for the state of Iowa. Wanted to, before jumping into the agenda, I wanted to make sure and thank you, Mayor and Council, for one, allowing us to partner with the city to deploy our services, and two, allowing us to present and give you an update because it has been some while since we've addressed the team here. Certainly our goals and with our partnerships with the city and specifically Clive is to grow as the city grows. We want to boost the quality of life and of business for residents and businesses within the city. We want to drive economic development, and we want to jumpstart the competition because we do feel like we're raising the bar. And our competitors, the incumbents, maybe the telcos, the cable companies of the world are having to do some different things as a result of our presence. And it's good. In the end result, whether you're a customer or not, the residents and the businesses within Clive will benefit from us participating and hopefully raising that bar. Also wanted to thank you personally for being a customer of ours as well. The City of Clive Public Safety has us as a primary ISP provider, and we really appreciate that opportunity as well. All right. So jumping into the agenda, we'll give you a quick company overview, which may be a little bit of an update from when you've heard or what you've seen from us in the past. And then we'll go into the city build status, talk a little bit more about our community commitment, and then allow you to ask some questions. So having said that, so MetroNet was established in 2005. Interestingly enough, it was established in Evansville, Indiana. And unfortunately, Evansville is not one of the cities that we provide, but is our corporate office. MetroNet, for those of you that don't know, is a cutting-edge fiber optic communication provider, providing high-speed fiber internet directly to the home or directly to the business. And we're heavily focused on customer service. And that's one of the bars that we're raising for our competitors. Hopefully they'll match the bar, hit the bar as well. But as an update, and maybe something that you don't know, MetroNet is now serving over 250 communities in over 16 states. And that rapid growth over the last couple of years that you may not be aware of has just been phenomenal, which makes us one of the nation's largest independently owned fiber optic company. So we're very pleased with that. And we have some recognition by some industry leaders. First and foremost, I wanted to let you know that folks at our leadership level in safety and quality assurance are leaders on numerous 811 boards you can see here on the slide. A couple of the other favorite examples that I like to bring up here is Ookla at the third quarter of last year announced Iowa as the fastest internet service provider in the state, which is obviously a great milestone. Netflix, interestingly enough, as you can probably imagine, is very needy from a bandwidth perspective and really appreciates companies like Metronet and being able to perform and gain subscribers to their cause. So they announced this as one of the best performers in the internet ISP speed indexes. And then lastly, just a couple of weeks ago, CityView announced Metronet as the company's best local internet service provider in the Des Moines area. So we've achieved a few milestones, have a bit of work left to do, but we're excited about the opportunity. We're excited about the successes that we've had so far. And at this point, I'll go ahead and introduce and turn over the presentation to Charles Littleton, who is our Director of Outside Plant, and he'll give you a little bit of an update on our city build status.
All right. Thank you, Craig. Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you very much for having us again. Very happy to be here. I enjoy giving these updates. I love seeing the green coming up on the map. It's good for the company and it's good for your residents. It's part of what we try to achieve here is to ensure that the construction plans go forward and that we get the residents up as fast as possible, right? So far today, what we've completed is about 5,617 passes, about 38 miles of underground fiber optic cable has been deployed, and about 32 miles of aerial. That gives us a little over half of the deployment from the original plan has been deployed so far. We're continuing to build throughout the city of Clive. We'll be starting back up as the weather warms back up. It's still a little chilly out. What is remaining? We got about 2,500 more passes, 25 miles of underground to build, and about 8 miles of aerial fiber optics to deploy. We're looking at, again, by the end of this year, 23, we'll be done with the original plan build for the city of Clive. And then as we go into 24, a few expansions that come up as we continue to grow the city of Clive, as you mentioned, we will be continuing doing expansions into 24 and beyond, I hope. Yep.
While you're on this map, if you don't mind, you say the original area that you plan to complete, is that what's in the green now? Is your area to complete? Or?
Right. So you'll see the areas of the green and then you got the other ones that are not quite highlighted there, CO 9, 11, and 12. Those are nomenclature for our little neighborhoods.
And those are on the initial plan or those are?
They were part of the initial plans.
Okay.
Yeah,
Those should be done by 2023.
They'll be done this year.
Yeah, when Chuck mentions expansion, it's really our Shadow Creek neighborhood, our northwest neighborhoods. Everything else east of Alice's Road is a part of that original build. The entire city.
Right. So as City of Clive grows, we're here to grow with you.
I have additional questions on this, but maybe you'll answer them. So we'll continue and maybe come back to this one.
Okay, well, that's really part of my presentation as far as our growth goes. I do know that.
Well, let's dive into this one now. That's all right.
Do I have the next slide, right?
I guess some of my concerns have been the calls from residents
Sure.
that I've been getting. And if you look at this map, very heavy business centric. And if you follow this down Hickman, down the interstate, it's very commercial. And this was sold to the residents kind of, and as us, they're getting peppered with messages from you, right? As I am, as a resident. I appreciate it. And to the earlier point, this does bring everybody up. And I'll say the name, I'm tired of MediaCom, right? And many are, but they like options and they're frustrated because they're being peppered by your messaging. But if you look, your residential areas are not covered. And
Right.
It's very heavy commercial until you get out, maybe out west, and you can see some of that northwestern side that goes into the residential side. It's a little disappointing that we're not covering a lot of the residentials in between there.
Right.
Especially in these easy chunks.
Right, and that's where we're actually trying to focus into our next build and to the more of the residential areas on the east side there of 86th Street. We're getting on the others where the tracks are and trying to get that launched right away.
But why not? I mean, just maybe this is an operational question. Is it a
had
financial
lots of
thing that you
factor-
hit the commercial first? Because
No, it is factors where we
frustrating
were
folks
building
in
the
the
ring
residence.
and the backhaul of the ring. Has had a lot of factor of that.
Okay.
So I wanted to follow up on that question, actually. So, you know, I'll give myself an example, right? So I received a message from MetroNet back in August, I think, for all, and my neighbors did too, about construction starting. And, you know, you get excited, all that, but nothing ever came of it. And when I called in, it was just kind of a, oh yeah, we're still working on that. So it feels like there, you know, to Michael's point, there's this operational disconnect between the messaging that's going out versus what's actually happening a little bit. And so that has led to, you know, some calls and the other types of calls that I'm getting from residents is, you know, some complaints about after the work's done, it's not put back the way it was, right?
Right, the
quite the same.
restoration of the.
Yeah, the restoration, yeah.
Right, and I can speak a little bit to that. So we have taken a step, not so much back as far as the work goes. We have actually went back to our contractors and reviewed them to find the right contractor that'll fit within the, excuse me, the culture here to make sure that they can adhere to what we're trying to build here. And I think we finally selected the right people so that when we really start to have, because as it warms up, we go fast, right? But we need to make sure that we're not going so fast that we're not forgetting the restoration.
Absolutely.
And so we've really kind of went through our contractors and found the right people that will come in and follow these guidelines that ensure us that as we move forward through the neighborhoods, that we're not leaving a mess behind us,
So
that we're doing the restoration that we need to do to make sure the customers come up and they're happy.
So now that you've had these, you know, you've kind of had the right fit contractor come in, do you foresee any kind of smoothing out of those kind of operational challenges and kind of the messaging?
Very much so. That's our hope. And that's the time effort that we put in to discuss and train and really say, this is exactly what we have to do. Even if we go a lot slower, this is what we have to do so that they don't have those issues.
Sure. And, you know, one other thing I'll mention, you know, like Michael said, you know, it is a little disappointing to see how many residential areas are not covered because, you know, as Craig was saying, as far as like the number of wards you've won, the quality of the ISP,
Right.
that's something a lot of our residents can't experience, even if they want to right now.
Right.
So, you know, it's a bit disappointing.
Well, I hopefully won't be so disappointing by the end of the year. Because we'll cover all of the residents at that point.
Sounds good.
So, good.
Yeah, and I reiterate that, and I'm one of them, that the contacts have come numerous and the responses from me and my neighbors. I mean, I've heard from at least a dozen in my area and a half a dozen businesses. We're ready to jump and try something new. You keep asking and asking, we keep emailing back and saying, sign us up. And it's been a year. Look, T-Mobile wireless is about my next thing and it'll be here tomorrow.
Right.
So maybe stop emailing us
Right.
until you're ready in my neighborhood. Or
So we do have a piece of our communications. I was going to say, you know, sometimes we jump ahead where we're, you know, on our communications. I think is where really what's happened there is we got our communications happening too far in advance of where we're actually building. And so that's something that's actually on me to make sure that we don't do that. And so that should have actually been fixed already, and I believe it has. So going forward, as we do go into areas, we have a 45 days in advance notice that goes out to the customers. We're going to be in your yard. And then about a month before then, we get another card in the mail. Everybody sees it as junk mail. That's what usually ends up at, right? Little postcard.
Well, that's what it's become.
Yeah. And then we come in with, we're here. All right. We put the signs out. We're here. We're building. And then that's when the residents really kind of interact with us because we're in their neighborhoods, we're in their yards.
So one question I have on that piece. So you said that 45-day timeline, right? So does that mean that, like Michael and my neighborhoods will get another notice 45 days before the new timeline?
Right. So yeah, I'm glad he did it. I'm not my computer.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that your message is being heard and addressed. Our marketing team is moving very quickly, sometimes quicker than
Little
we
too
can
quickly.
build.
So
And that's unfortunate because it does. I mean, it sets us up, I don't want to say for failure, but disappointment.
I think that's a good word.
Because, they feel like, oh my gosh, we're going to have an option, but then it doesn't happen in a timely manner. So we're working closely with the corporate marketing group to better align that. And just so you know, our standard protocol is typically to do that mailing 30 to 45 days prior to the start of construction. And that's the area that Charles and his team would be working at. It's not all of the city.
No, it shouldn't be the whole city. It's always that LCP. That mailer goes out, and it's incumbent upon me and my team to make sure that we don't do that too soon. And so we've actually backed off on a lot of that just to make sure we're dead on time, exactly on that date.
And unfortunately, opportunity for improvement, that has not happened correctly, obviously, as you're pointing out. And so we're trying to fix that.
Yep.
Second notification will be some postcards again that are mailed 7 to 10 days prior. Third notification is a yard sign that's placed. People will complain about those as well, but it does let them know that we're going to be in the area within the next week.
Right. And you'll see those little signs that come into the yards. And then as we do our startup of the actual construction, when we just start doing locates, we knock on doors. We have these, they're not real sticky, but they can do adhere a little bit to like doors and whatever. They won't peel paint or anything, but we always leave the contact number of the contractor working there. If they have any questions, concerns whatsoever, they'll have his number. They got our number of my guys that are working in the field, so they can always talk to them.
I think that's maybe where one of the disconnects, and I'll get with Pete offline, because the little yard signs, these little ones here in this picture, have littered my neighborhood a couple times. And if they're in our yard, as number 3 says, 3 to 5 days prior, what they're hearing is, yeah, the fiber's in, but it's not connected, or it's not. And so this isn't matching what's happening out there. And I only take this opportunity along tonight because I don't always have an opportunity to talk direct. I've tried a couple times, and I've talked to Pete about it a couple times. This is not matching at all what's happening in the neighborhoods. I'll speak for the eastern side of Clive. So maybe we need to get together.
I appreciate the
match.
information feedback. It gives me something to focus on, and then, make sure my guys and my teams understand that this needs to happen when we're constructing, but they're actually supposed to pick them up when we're done. That's the
bigger
other thing.
complaint. It's that you aren't just constructing, but I can't hook up. I think that's where they're upset.
Yeah.
All
The yard
right.
gets torn up and all, they call in to join, and then they're told, not yet. We're not completely.
Right.
81st is, there's some businesses on Hickman that they've been told it's all around them, but you haven't made some connection. And those businesses are waiting on security systems
Interesting.
to make that decision by MetroNet.
That's interesting.
Fair. Yeah, that's room for certainly for improvement in the communications. And so that's the challenge. I mean, we want them to know that we're going to be in their neighborhood constructing the backbone, if you will.
Right.
What we need to make sure we understand is that at that point, they think, well, shortly then I should be able to sign up and get service. It may be a week.
It could
may
be a month and a half. It
month.
depends on the size of the area that we're constructing.
Yeah.
You know, certain neighborhoods, areas are a little bit smaller than others. I always figure 45 days to be done with that and have fiber spliced in, but you're talking about a month and a half before they can consider
so
signing
that-
up for services.
Those signs were last spring in our neighborhood.
Right. So those were the ones that I believe that were really done in air, and
Mhm.
we're well ahead of the construction
Yeah.
portion of the side of the business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else, Ted?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. So I totally understand where Mike and Shrikant are coming from. I certainly agree with everything they're saying. I guess the good news for you guys is people want the service,
Yeah.
right? So they're eager to have it, right? A lot of it's just expectation management,
Right.
right? And
Absolutely.
certainly appreciate a lot of your communication efforts. But I mean, hopefully you guys have heard where the improvement areas need to come. I'll just end on a positive. I'm in the CE10 district, and so I've had the service
Of
for
course.
yeah, for about a year.
I hear a little
Yeah, that's
jealousy
right.
there.
The haves and the have.
I had some power there. So, but yeah, that's right. So, but I've been very pleased with the service. Initially, there were some challenges with configuration and things of that nature, but I did want to let you know that your customer service was excellent. So,
Thanks.
so I really appreciate that, and I'm very happy that I'm not with the old company at this point. So,
Well,
All right, I'm gonna
Appreciate
turn it
that.
back to you.
I have
Yeah.
One more question.
yeah, sure. That's fine. We've got just maybe a slide left too.
Well, I just want to go back to that map. real
Oh,
quick.
okay, sure. Oops.
So that CE16 is different than the others. Is there something different about that?
That's the next one we're going into,
Okay.
and that's where the actually part of it's already built. We're just going into 86th Street to finish it up and be able to light it up here pretty quick.
So, and sorry, this will be the last one about the map.
That's all right.
Is there a planned route to fill in kind of the rest? Is it kind of that east to west, or is it just more random than that as far as the order of those neighborhoods?
So I can give you kind of like the order right here. So we're going to be going from CE 16. We're doing CE 21, CE 11 and excuse me, CE 9, 11 and 12.
I don't actually see.
11 and 12
I
are
see.
partially built, but
Okay.
they offer a significant challenge because of the type of construction that actually occurs
Sorry.
there.
What was that?
They require different equipment,
Okay.
right? And so we have to wait for it to be nice and warm.
So that's the CE21 that you were talking about?
Yeah, CE 11 and 12.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And also for CE11, we held them up a little bit with our Clark Street construction because that was their preferred route through that neighborhood. So when we were reconstructing that street, we didn't let anybody do anything along that corridor. And so that now that we've completed that construction, that opens up CE11 for that main spine to do through the middle of the neighborhood.
And one other just caveat for all of the stakeholders involved throughout this process, the logistics of getting everybody organized and getting everybody who's culturally appropriate for working in Clive, who wants to take care of the Clive, do it the Clive way, takes time and creates complexity. And that complexity can change up the order in which some of these things do move forward. But during our discussion this afternoon, we did emphasize with CEO 16, Councilman, that's the area that you were mentioning that would be for servicing those businesses and the resident on 81st Street, that was a priority special project.
Yes.
So that is a different color because that will be the next one where they committed to getting it.
Absolutely.
And candidly, we had some issues. We had some challenges. We didn't meet expectations and meet the culture and the commitment that Clive has presented to us. And that honestly has slowed us down a bit.
It is.
And now we think we're on a good track. I still am very glad that we are now serving over 50% of the city. I can also tell you, can't give you specific numbers. It's not public. Can do that offline, certainly if necessary, but we're extremely pleased with the adoption and the engagement that we have of the customers at least where we are live. We're exceeding companies' expectations on the take rates and penetration. And it's I love it. It's putting us on the map. It's
good.
besides the surrounding areas having that kind of success as well, Iowa is really kind of one of the leaders in our company from
Yeah,
that
it's great.
perspective. So we're
I like it.
real pleased with that. So obviously we want more.
We want more.
And so build more. And so I've got, if you've got some more questions, that's fine. I've got one more slide that I wanted to just cover
Thank you
briefly.
very much.
Thanks, Charles.
One
So,
one moment, Craig, Councilman Klein does have his hand up.
oh, sure.
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your presentation here, and I can also appreciate the scope of a project like this for both capital improvement and labor intensive. You talked a bit about rapid growth, and another area that I've seen rapid growth in is my monthly bill. I live in CE007, and since last April, it's grown 20% since that initial. One of the things that concerns me is there's no prior notification like I got received from MediaCom on price increases. What's your communications plan on increasing costs and how you relay that to your consumers?
Good question. Thanks for bringing that up and the kind comment as well. So yes, it's very important one for people who are just first accessing and getting our system, our service, to understand their bill. And that's a huge thing for us. We do a lot of work with if there's going to be any increases, and I haven't, since the 2 years that I've been involved, I haven't seen any increases in our service charges. Pardon me? Yeah.
On the internet.
Right. Yeah.
TV, we don't.
Yeah. So the initial communications would come directly via email, via social media, via bill notices as well. So hopefully that answered your question. I'm not sure it did.
Yeah, I'm not sure it did either. I mean, if you're not aware of internet increases, I can assure you, I track things very closely. And again, it's been a 20% increase. So I can assure you.
In MetroNet service to you?
That's correct.
Okay.
It might be because, and Eric, I'm just spitballing here because I know I've had the same thing, but it's been because I had a promotional rate at the beginning and then it
Possibly
went up
so.
after that period ended.
That's possibly
So
so.
I don't know if that's the case with you or not, but that.
And I can certainly follow up and identify exactly what it was too for you as well.
I think that could be accurate. I try and keep track of your communications that you send out to neighborhoods. And I think I read in the lower print that there was a promotional rate. Initially, it would be followed by a new rate after the promotional period.
Well, I'll have to get out my magnifying glass to see that fine print.
Yeah, very good. So, we kind of alluded to growing as the city grows. So we want to make sure that the city understands that once the city build process is over, it's not done for MetroNet with Clive. We've got a community development manager. Calvin here is with us tonight, and the community development group works with HOAs, works with apartments, works with condos and townhomes. Typically, things that are not on public streets, for example, would require a utilities access agreement to allow us to come in and build service to them. New residential developments is another part of the community development team. And we kind of alluded to Shadow Creek. That expansion has already been approved and it's on the construction schedule. And in our methods, that if city build is still in process, when that process is completed and approved, city build will go ahead and build that area. So Shadow Creek, Charles's group will end up, and that'll be part of the stuff that's in early 24, but as well as community engagement. And we've got a community engagement coordinator named Madison Grell. She's not here this evening, but she's one of the best coordinators in our company. We do a lot in the cities that we work with. Specifically here in Clive, you can kind of see in the photos there that we were a title sponsor for Food Truck Fridays. We were a title sponsor for Sunday Family Movie Series. We participated, gave out free hot chocolate at tree lightings. We're very much looking forward to a couple of additional events that are coming up in the Clive Festival and the Greenbelt Musical Festival. So we're a part of the community, and we want to make sure that we continue to support and grow as the city grows as well.
So I've got one more question.
Sure.
So I'm sure you heard, and this is why you guys don't take my calls anymore, by the way.
Well,
I've been calling like every week.
I'm going to give you my personal cell phone number and we're going to make sure that your calls are
I wouldn't do
answered.
that. I gave him
that's a
mine.
big-
and I
Yeah.
take it back.
Okay, I'm going to give you Charles's personal cell phone. Well, no, there it is, right there in black and white. That's really not my number.
Well, no, I had a question about, I'm sure you heard about Google Fiber announcing the 5 and 8 gig service in West Des Moines. And
Yeah.
then MediaCom, I think, just announced maybe a few days ago about the 10 gig service in West Des Moines. Are you guys kind of I know you mentioned you want to see that competition, you want to
Yeah.
see those other providers.
Yeah.
Is that something you're kind of planning for as well on your horizon?
So we think we kind of helped push them along in providing that. So yes, Google just announced an additional layer of service from, they've got a 1 and a 2 gig symmetrical service. They're offering a 5 gig symmetrical service. And I believe we'll be doing that as in Des Moines as well. Only West Des Moines at this time. MediaCom as well. One of the big issues, again, are, the price of the service and what offerings that we're bringing to the table. MediaCom has never in company's history offered a symmetrical product to residents. They will be now. Funny that they do that after we come in. And just the other thing I wanted to make sure I mention that in November, we offered a 2 gig symmetrical service as well. We're looking at, and this is a lot has to do with the hardware and the technologies that are deployed within that, but 2 gig, up to 2 gig symmetrical on the residential side, up to 10 gig symmetrical on the business side. So we think we kind of help push those competitors that way. Happy problem, but we're eager to compete with them on that, because I think from a price performance standpoint and customer support standpoint, we can continue to raise the bar on them.
So it sounds like the investments you're making now see that 10 gig service, or maybe even beyond that, be a viable product.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the good things is when those upgrades are available, there may be an optical network terminal in the home that would need to be replaced. The fiber wouldn't. So we're not going to be disrupting their yard or your streets again as a result to do that, which is great about the fiber product to be able to do that. But we'll have hut and head end upgrades, and we'll have optical network terminals. And then a lot of people are using wireless more and more. We're seeing, averages throughout the nation of up to 20, things that are being done in the family, in the home through a wireless perspective. And so there's some issues there. So like with the Euro wireless routers within the home, that may be, if we go to 5 gig, if and when we go to 5 gig and 10 gig, there may be some changes there as well, but not the fiber that's coming in.
Sure.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
Are you good? I think I used everyone's allotment of questions.
We'll be glad to answer them after at another time as well.
Yeah, Your Honor, I did want to point out, and Jared is here, Etchison, with our Public Works crew. He's our right-of-way specialist, and he is a big part of this operation on the city side in terms of approving the permits, tracking down those restoration issues. We've had situations, and the MetroNet folks know this, that we've held up permits because we demand to see these restoration issues be resolved. And so that can contribute a little bit to the slowness, but it is because in Clive, we want to see it done right, see it done safely, and then see these things restored. And Jared is a big part of that, along with Jerry and Jeff and the rest of the Public Works crew. So again, I think that shows the council's commitment when we created that position to manage these right-of-way projects, because we know MetroNet is the main project now, but who knows what the next project is, and to stay on top of it. And as former Mayor Sirksina, sitting in the back of the room as well, knows the right-of-way challenges that we've had over the years very well with telecoms and restoration. I think that's a legacy of this council and this community to see that managed properly, and Jared's a big part of that. So,
Michael.
Not a question, but it's to Matt's point and to Jared, since you're front and center. a blessing and a curse. Sounds like you are, because some of the complaints, but once we've gotten an opportunity to explain to the residents, like on 81st and stuff, has been because you've held some things up, right? But again, a blessing because you're doing it the right way and you're holding people's feet to the fire. When residents find that out, they appreciate it. This gentleman that I'm talking about on 81st actually spoke of you by name in high regards and complimented how you handled it, how you talked to him, was very happy. So it's great to have someone out in the field like you with a Clive hat on, sending that Clive message. And again, if we can get the message to the residents and not the frustration that's behind it, get them the real message, you're doing many of our jobs. And so thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And we will tell you that Jared and team are tough and hold us to those standards and the culture that Clive has that's maybe a little bit unique to others that we're serving in your neighborhood, in your neighbors, but for all the right reasons. So we do appreciate that.
MetroNet also deserves credit for contributing to a real plus in Clive's culture too, because as our redundant or one of our other ISP providers, their uptime has led to us having fewer issues. In fact, their uptime with our new configuration at CPSC, getting in there early on when they were first coming in at Clive, they set us up so that when we recently had a disruption with our other provider, we flipped over and nobody even noticed a hiccup, which means that all of the services, which really means everything that happens in the city, continue to happen without disruption. But it takes great infrastructure partners like that.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to say anything about MetroNet?
Good, bad, or indifferent.
Seeing none, thank you. and
Thank
good
you,
luck.
Mayor. Thanks, council.
We'll move to the consent item requires resolution.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Further discussion, seeing none, would the council please vote? Consent says, please vote. Can the clerk please post the vote?
I'm a yes.
And consent passes by a vote of 5-0. We'll move into our action item. The first item, Richard, is Circina Park.
All right. Well, Amanda and I are going to tag team this. I'm going to give you a little bit of the background on the work that we've done working with the neighborhood on Circina Park, and I'll let her wrap it up with the site plan process. Let me get the presentation pulled up here. All right, thank you. Well, it's exciting to be here tonight. I know Julie and Scott Circina are in the back, and so we're excited to have them here as well. This has been a lot of work to get us to this point, and we're excited to get this project moving forward to construction and hopefully wrapping it up by the end of the year. So just a little bit of a primer here. So just a general location of the park. It's located at 3575 Westgate Parkway. For those that aren't familiar, that's just west of Alice's Road, north of Douglas, and the park borders Westgate Parkway on the west side of the property. So what we want to do is, not having any images here, that might make this a little bit difficult.
Maybe you have to just look at a line.
Your imagination.
There isn't. Maybe I'll throw the flash drive in and we'll see if they're still there.
Hopefully it's not the PowerPoint format. Yeah.
Yeah. Keep us in suspense. That's right.
Well, it does not appear to be showing up there either for some reason. So I will just briefly talk through this. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it here. Oh, maybe they will find a way to do it. So maybe we'll give Pete just a second here to see if we can pull it up, because they kind of tell the story of the larger.
Beautiful.
It is. That's what it's going to look like.
In the packet is the summary of changes sheet. So worst case.
We can go to that if we need to.
I am a judge.
That appears to still work here on this one. We'll just see if the P can pull up the one that shows.
I believe what we have here is a issue with the update to Windows 2019, a new version of the platform that has created a few hiccups between the different parts of the office.
Hey, the old one we used for park board last week still works, so we'll bring that up.
Okay, problem solved. Uh-oh.
Picking your feet.
Enable external content.
That doesn't show up on
No,
mine.
feeds.
Now that's,
Is it okay?
you can go ahead and, yeah,
There you go.
All right, we'll start this again.
there we go.
So one of the things we want to do is kind of walk you through the process of where we started in 2019 with the original concepts for the park through all the way where we're at and the recommendation we have tonight. So this was the original concept plan that was developed by RDG for the Northwest Parks. If you recall, it was a new park for this area, a new park for the Alice's Road site, which is just north of Little Walnut Creek on the west side of Alice's Road. And then the future park that'll be across the street from Schuler Elementary at the pond there. So this is the first one of those three concepts that's moving forward. You can see here the proposed concept at the time was really a neighborhood-based park between the 55 plus townhome development to the south and the single family residential to the north. Really a lot of nature-based activities here. This site actually serves the stormwater for both of the surrounding developments. So we're looking at, having that stormwater kind of through the whole park integrated with the park amenities, a small open circle for, if you want to kick a ball around, if you just want to play or have a picnic, some small play features, and then access to the pond there that has the ability to fish in it. So that was kind of the original concept in 2019. Then as we rehired RDG to take those concepts into the final site plan, they did some revisions to that to give us a little bit more depth on what the park could actually look like. So you can see here, much of the same kind of elements are there. You see that round circle, you see the connections to the neighborhood, and you see more refined play elements as well as a small shelter just to the left-hand side of the pond itself. So then last October, we started to run these out and have meetings with the neighborhood. We hosted a neighborhood meeting at the Shadow Creek Townhomes community building that they have there. And we think we had almost 70 people attend that meeting, really well attended from not only the townhome development, but the residential properties all around that. And we heard a lot of different things out there. Probably the first was privacy. There was concerns that the development of this new park would infringe on some of their privacy with the trail and how close it was. There's really a big desire to beef up some of the buffers between the park elements and their property. There was concerns about the pond and how it would look, how it'd be used, and how close it might be to any proposed shelter or playground elements. Trails, concerned about the distance between the trail itself and private property. And then the shelter and the play elements, just concerned about the overall size, where it was located within the park, and just how those would impact the pond and the private property. So we took that forward to the Parks and Recreation Board to kind of have a second discussion on that. And one of the things that the board requested we do following that meeting was send out a resident questionnaire to all properties within 1,000 feet of Circina Park. So following that, we sent that out and we asked them to go online and do a quick questionnaire to answer 3 questions. So they really focused on the key elements, the concerns that we heard at the public meeting, as well as the Park and Recreation Board. In total, we got 88 responses to these 3 questions. Number 1, how important is a smaller set of natural play features to you? So that's talking about the play elements, the playground features, knowing that the way we presented it was not a full playground that you'd see in a typical park, but more smaller natural play elements. Second was, how important is a small shaded shelter to you? So we're not talking about a big picnic shelter that would seat 80 or 100 people. We're talking about something that is 2 to 4 or 5 picnic tables max. So something you could have your family or a few friends out, just a place to get shade within the park and be close to the play area. And then finally, the third big element was related to the walking loop. and trail through the park space. So asking how important that was to people through that. Just to give you a feel on where we got responses from of the 88. So all the stars on the map represent places that we got responses from. So you see a good representation, not only from the townhomes to the south, but basically entire neighborhood surrounding the park. So this is just a quick summary of all of the responses that we got related to those 3 questions. So the first one is related to the natural play features. And then we just asked very simple questions, very important, somewhat important, not important. And you can see the total 88 responses. Next talks about the small shaded shelter area. Very important, somewhat important, and not needed. And then finally, the third question, how important is the walking loop or trail throughout the park space to you? Very important, somewhat important, and not needed. So based on all the feedback that we had gotten from the neighborhood meeting, the Parks and Recreation Board, and this questionnaire, we looked at making changes to the site plan before we presented it to the Parks and Recreation Board and then the Plan and Zoning Commission. So what you see here is the red is the original site plan that we had presented to the Parks and Recreation Board, the neighborhood. And what you see underneath that, or areas where you see black, are areas where we made changes. So I'll just summarize them real quickly what we did, because it may be a little bit hard to read. We heard a lot about the location of the play features in the shelter area and how it was located, A, to properties, and B, to the pond, concerns about the closeness of that. What we're able to do is shift that approximately 30 feet to the north. It did a couple different things. It got it farther away from the pond, and it got it farther away from the townhomes to the south. So that's kind of this area here. The red is the original, and you can kind of see the black line here shows the shift to the north a little bit. Next, we move park bench locations further away from private property. One of the things, the way the bench locations were kind of oriented, people felt like if people are sitting on them, they might be sitting in their backyards. So what we were able to do is shift bench locations to more interior areas of the park. And when they faced private property, we just made sure they faced towards a berm or a dense landscape kind of bunching, so that people wouldn't feel like if they're sitting on a bench, they'd be looking at their backyard. We moved sidewalk and trail further from the property lines. So you can see a couple different things we did here. So there's a lot of concern from people here about how close the red was, the trail would come to their property. We were able to shift that approximately 10 feet to the north there. And then on both sides of the trail loop, we were able to shift that in 6 to 7 feet to the south from the single family properties and 6 to 7 feet north from the townhomes to the south there. Couple of things we were kind of constrained by on the west hand part there is that we have to have a certain capacity with the stormwater facilities. So we were able to make that work, but that kind of impacted how far we could shift that. But we feel like the 10 feet to the north there really will make a difference for them, as well as the 6 to 7 feet to the north and south of the actual loop itself. And then one we did is added clusters of trees and native grasses on both the north and southern borders. So hearing the privacy concerns, there are areas where there's berms as well as shrubs and tall grasses and trees that'll help to build that kind of dense private, either landscape or buffer between the private property and the park. So just to kind of walk through what we believe the elements will look like here. So this is the type of shelter that we are talking about. It's anywhere from 2 to 4 picnic tables there. And on the right are kind of representative of the type of play elements that we will have at the park. So in total, there'll be about 5 of these, but you can see they're pretty small in nature. 1 swing, a log pile, a couple posts for kids to play on, and then a kind of a step cluster in the bottom left hand. So not your traditional playground elements, but a more small to fit kind of the smaller nature that people are going to be coming from the surrounding neighborhood. This isn't going to be a park that people are going to drive to, and it's not going to be a destination. It's really meant to serve the surrounding neighborhood. These images are the kind of what we think the landscape's going to look like out there. So give it that natural feel, but want to have pops of color, ways to have the landscape used to be that kind of buffer between the residents and the park itself, but really want it to be a really beautiful natural looking space. And then finally, this is the site plan that was submitted to the Plan and Zoning as well as the Park and Recreation Board. That's just kind of the physical elements of it. This kind of breaks down what the landscape looks like. And maybe the best way to describe this is all around the private property edges of the park, there'll be a 4-foot mowed turf grass to make sure that in the natural native landscaping doesn't flop over into people's private property. Then along the trails, there'll be a couple foot buffer. And then the inner part of that circle will be mowed turf grass. The rest of the park itself will be different types of native vegetation, landscaping, and buffers. And then finally here, this is just the final grading plan that has been submitted. I just wanted to point out a couple things here. We do have some of the berms there. You can kind of see berms on the north and one along the south here. One of the things we still have to do is make sure that we have drainage from the residential areas and the townhomes, make sure that drains away from their areas and into the park. So we were limited a little bit by that, but it's just kind of a brief to show that we have some berming there to help increase some of the privacy from those private property owners. And that's the last item I have related to that. I'll just say that it was unanimously approved by the Parks, Recreation, and Public Art Board at their February meeting, and I will turn the rest over to Amanda.
Thanks, Richard. Mayor, Council, good evening. I won't rehash everything because Richard did a great job for me. So I will just give you a quick summary of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then if you do have any questions about the layout, I'm happy to attempt to answer those. So Planning and Zoning did consider this at their February meeting. They did recommend approval on a 4-to-1 vote. The one commissioner that had raised concerns about the proximity of the shelter and play area to the pond. They had concerns about that, so they had voted against it, but the other 4 members voted for approval that were there, or sorry, 4-to-1, 5-to-1 vote. For who were there that night. There was some public comment, not from a ton of residents, but I think a vocal section that Richard's team worked with quite a bit throughout the process. So we heard most of the concerns that Richard did just bring up. One other item, or a couple other items we got into was more specific on the drainage around those courtyards at Shadow Creek Townhomes. So we kind of took a detailed look at the grading plan at that meeting. And then walked through the cross slope on the trail actually shifts partway through the park to keep the sheet flow going to those bioretention areas. So that seemed to address those neighborhood concerns. And then the privacy and the shifting of the trail, I think, was a big component of people not being against the park after that meeting. They had stated some concerns, and I think largely, aside from 1 or 2 residents, felt that the changes from Richard's team and RDG had addressed their comments that were previously given. But they did come to the meeting, and so we talked through those items. So with that, staff does recommend approval of both the site plan and the resolution to assign the address formally. Since these properties were platted as outlots, they were not assigned an address with the final plats. So we have that resolution on the agenda tonight as well, so we can get that all in the system. So with that, I'd take any questions.
Questions?
So I know this isn't a destination park, so we won't have a ton of traffic driving there to it. But the townhomes just to the south, those are private roads. Is there any place to park if someone does want to drive to it?
Yeah, so there is public street parking around the park area that people could use. The private streets in the townhome are covered by a public easement for use, so people are allowed to drive through that area. Though they have some of their like visitor parking spots, but there's not really street parking traditionally in that neighborhood. And then Richard, I don't know, do you have any other specific locations for parking?
I would say, probably the most likely if someone wants to come to the park, they want to drive there, that it would be along the east-west street. I believe it's Aurora on the north of that, because there is a neighborhood connection from the park to that street from that standpoint. That's probably the most likely location that they would park, or maybe one of the side streets adjoining Westgate Parkway. But based on just the type of elements that we kind of plan for that, we don't believe that that's going to be a huge draw from that perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I just didn't know. Hopefully there's a little bit. So I did want to just say publicly how much I appreciate you and your team's work on this and how professional you guys have been in dealing with some of the challenges that we've had, because we have had quite a few challenges with this. And I think you guys have really handled it really well.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this? What we're looking for is a motion to approve the site plan.
Make a motion to approve the site plan for Circina Park.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none with the council, please vote. And then would the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 5-0. Next item would be to assign the address.
Make a resolution assigning address 3575 Westgate Parkway to Circina Park.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote?
Your Honor, why that vote is occurring, just wanted to mention too, now that the site plan is approved, we'll be moving forward with the public bidding process for the construction and probably in March, setting the public hearing for taking bids in March or early April to start construction. And we'll likely have some form of groundbreaking to do this spring or early summer, and we'll be sure to communicate that.
Very good. That resolution passes by a vote of 5-0. That's the last item on Circina Park. Julie and Scott, thanks for being here tonight. Next item is a public hearing on our pavement rehab project. Did we publish the appropriate public notice?
Public notice was published in the Des Moines Register on February 8th, 2023.
Thank you. Jim.
Thank you, Mayor. We received bids on a couple of projects last week. The first one for your consideration is this year's patching project. We will be completing work on Hawthorne Drive and Lakeshore Drive between 142nd Street and Country Club Boulevard this year. We received 4 bids. The tabulation is in your packet. Again, the concrete company was Red Low. You can kind of see there is a bit of a wider spread between low and high than we've seen in the past, but we were happy to see that unit price for patching get in under $90. If you remember, last year we received 1 bid and that unit price for the patching was at $125. So not positive that things have normalized, but certainly happy with the results that we've gotten here just recently.
Jim, not that it matters, but I haven't heard of the concrete company.
That leads right into my next subject. We've worked on a lot of projects with them recently. In 2021, they completed the arterial project. It was overnight work. They've also been a sub on a lot of projects with Des Moines Asphalt, doing patching prior to overlays. So we've always been happy with their work. Yeah, with that, I'd be looking to award to the concrete company and happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Jim? Ted?
No, I was waving to Scott.
Oh, you were waving to Scott. I'm sorry. Don't ever go to an auction, please.
Good call.
I have one.
Yes, Susan.
I've noticed that there are some pretty bad potholes that have occurred on the university part, right where it adjoins with Lake Point. What about those? Will those be repaired in the
That's the next
process?
project, and the answer is yes.
Okay.
Good
Okay.
question.
But I'll let Jonathan cover
Oh,
that.
yeah, I'm skipping ahead.
has all the
Okay,
answers
sorry
tonight.
about that.
He's ready for both of
I'll move
us.
to close
I
the public
know.
hearing.
We do have a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
And we have a second as well. Further discussion before we vote? Is there anyone in the council or online who wishes to address the council in this public hearing on the rehab project? I see no one in the chambers, and I assume we have no one online. Therefore, let the council vote to close the public hearing. And would the clerk please post that vote? And the motion to close public hearing passes by a vote of 5-0.
Move a resolution approving plans and
Okay.
specs.
We have a motion and a second to approve the plans and specs. For discussion, seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
You think?
And that passes by a vote of 5-0.
Move to receive the bids.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive the bids. Further discussion, seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? Bids are received by a vote of 5-0.
Move a resolution awarding the contract to the concrete company.
Second.
Motion second to award the contract to Concrete Company. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? Awarding the contract passes by a vote of 5-0. John, you're up. Did we publish the appropriate public notice for Lake Point reconstruction?
Yep, Des Moines Register, February 8th, 2023.
All yours, John.
Thank you, Mayor. So Lake Point Drive reconstruction will be the replacement of the pavement and storm sewer underneath the pavement between University Avenue, Northwest 138th Street. Along with that, a portion of University Avenue will also be replaced. Single lane of traffic will remain open along the westbound lanes at all times. In February 15th, the city received 3 bids. After tabulation, Alliance Construction was determined to be the lowest responsible bidder. Their bid is approximately 3% greater than the engineer's estimate. This can primarily be attributed to traffic control and various slight item increases on items. Staff recommends awarding the contract to Alliance Construction Group. And with that, I'd be glad to take any further questions.
Questions, Ted?
How long do we expect the university to be down to 1 lane?
That's a good question. I mean, it's hard to tell without actually talking with the contractor on those details, but the work would just involve removal and replacement of the pavement that's up against that connection. Without giving like a hard date, I'd say probably a week or so.
Will any of that work be done at night or is it all?
It's all daytime work.
Daytime? Okay,
Yeah, particularly with it being adjacent to residential.
right.
We
Yeah,
wanted to be
that's true.
cognizant of that.
Yeah.
And being that we did have a lane, we still have a lane open
Okay.
on University. We felt that night work wasn't warranted.
Yeah, that's a good call. Okay.
Will there be signage, the traffic signage that you were talking about, will that be a little bit further out, given that, you know, you've got Jordan Creek Parkway right there that tends to get pretty heavy traffic sometimes, like I could see that backing up.
Yes, yeah. We do have traffic control explicitly for University Avenue. When that portion of the project's phased out, it should be enough to allow drivers to be cognizant of the work and to merge over if need be. Luckily, it's only going to be the northmost lane, so it'll be traffic going westbound, either turning onto Jordan Creek or going further west on University.
Well, it's just, that's very close to that Hy-V there too. So you know, I don't want somebody to like immediately try to get to Hy-V and then somebody isn't paying attention and tries to cut over and all of a sudden you know, you're sideswiping each other.
Yeah, it's certainly signage and just hopefully the duration too of the closure helps.
It's a west side I mean.
Other questions? Seeing
I
none,
keep thinking that is getting closer to needing to be a signalized intersection. And what we've been told before is we're kind of waiting to see if there is another property that ends up being built on the Hy-V side of University before that decision would be made. But is there anything about this that needs to be thought about in terms of being prepared to signalize it that should be handled now with the reconstruction, so it's ready for that? That would save us money that we
Lanes or
prepared for it now. I don't know.
We do have in the reconstruction a left-bound turning lane and a right-bound lane. So in the event that were to be lit in the future, it should be a pretty easy incorporation. We won't have to tack on an additional lane or anything.
Yeah, and the last time that West Des Moines checked the warrant, it hadn't met warrants yet, but that is on there. They're always checking that anytime a new improvement happens on the commercial side of the street, that south side of the street. So we check in with them anytime they have any new development. And I know when the bank went in, they checked the warrants on that and it did not meet yet, but we keep in tune with West Des Moines on that.
other questions? Otherwise, we need to close the public hearing.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
A motion and a second to close public hearing. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And then would the clerk please post that vote? And the public hearing is closed by a vote of 5-0.
Move to resolution approving plans and specs.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve plans and specs. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? It's suspenseful. And that passes by a vote of 5-0.
Move to receive the bids.
Motion is second to receive the bids. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 5-0.
Move to resolution awarding the contract to Alliance Construction Group.
Second.
Motion is second to award the contract to Alliance Construction Group. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 5-0. Thank you, John. Liz will continue with the public hearing. The first one is the essential purpose loan agreement. Did we publish the appropriate public notice?
Yeah, both of these public hearings were published in the Des Moines Register on February 13th, 2023.
Thank you. Liz.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Been very busy working on borrowing for the capital improvement projects for this year. As required by state law, 2 public hearings are set for consideration of the loan agreements for the 2028 general obligation bonding. The agenda packet included all of the capital improvement planning projects that we're seeking funding for this year and the timeline for the process of the sale of the bonds. The reason for the 2 hearings, of course, is the First University Boulevard flood mitigation acquisition project is considered general obligation under Iowa code. Therefore, we're requiring separate hearings from all the other projects, which are essential purpose. Following the public hearings, staff would recommend approval. Following the public hearing, staff would recommend approval of the resolution to move forward with the bond issuance. Tonight, John Danos is here. Thank you, John, for coming. Here from Dorsey and Whitney, and we can answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions on this? Otherwise, we would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing for the essential purpose loan agreement.
Second.
The motion is second to close the public hearing. Is there anyone in the chamber address the council on this matter or anyone online? Seeing none, would the council please vote to close the public hearing? And will the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 5-0, close that public hearing. Now we have to move to our second public hearing dealing with the general purpose loan agreement. And Matthew has already indicated we did publish appropriate public notice, I believe, on the 13th. Liz, continue.
I have nothing more to continue.
Well, thank you very much.
I'll move to close the public hearing for general purpose loan agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the second public hearing. Is there anyone in the chamber or online to address the council on this matter? Seeing none, would the council please vote on closing the public hearing? And then would the clerk please post that vote? And the motion to close the public hearing, drum roll, passes by a vote of 5-0. Now, the next item is a resolution taking care of these matters.
Move the resolution to enter into the loan agreements and combine loan agreements.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the resolution. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would clerk post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 5-0. Liz, we've got another public hearing, and this is on the maximum property tax dollars. Matthew, did we publish the appropriate public notice on this?
Yes, Your Honor, this one was published in the Des Moines Register on February 9th, 2023.
Very good. Liz?
Yeah. So as you may recall, in 2020 was the first year that council had to take the extra step in your budgeting process to adopt the process, or excuse me, adopt the budget by setting a public hearing on the max levy rate. So you can see from the notice, it exceeds the 2% allowable value growth threshold. This step is required by legislation. It must be posted on the website and social media outlets. Now, since I drafted the synopsis and for the council packet and then our last budget workshop, the governor did sign Senate File 181, which requires the Department of Revenue to recalculate the residential rollback for the 22 assessment year, which affects our budget. So the signing of Senate File 181 into law, it affects our city budget process in a few ways. First, it'll roll back our residential property by lowering it to the 54.65. This will result in a reduction of our taxable valuation. The county auditors are working now on getting us those valuations, and they have 15 days. So at first, when I put it in your synopsis, I mentioned that we'd set the public hearing at the next meeting, but we're gonna have to push that back to March 23rd. It still will keep us on track for an April 13th public hearing. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about the max levy rate.
Add on to that too, the Senate File 181 moves back the required deadline to approve your budget from March 30th to April 30th. So hence we can go into April because we have an extra week in between the second March meeting and the first meeting in April. We can set the hearing on March 23rd and you'd still have the consideration of the budget on April 13th. And then at that point, you'd have the full budget before you consideration and then the first readings like we normally do of the ordinances related to the utilities.
Questions for Liz? Otherwise, what we're asked to do is close the public.
Move to close the public hearing.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion, a second to close the public hearing. Before we do so, is there anyone in the chamber or online who wishes to address the council on this matter? Seeing none, would the council please vote on closing the public hearing? And then would the clerk please post that vote? And since this is suspended, wow,
Nice.
5-0. I was gonna ask Liz if she'd anticipated considering a 90% or so increase as jurisdictions south of us did on the maximum. Everybody see that on the news? Oh my gosh.
And is it Warren?
Well, I saw the Warren County, yeah.
Yeah. Their chambers were filled with angry people.
Yeah.
And you still have another vote.
We
That was
still
just-
have, yes,
yeah.
we've got to vote on
I'm
the
all over
resolution.
this. Move the resolution approving fiscal year 23-24 maximum property tax dollars.
Second.
Motion is second on the resolution. Further discussion, seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote? And that passes 5-0. We're back to road projects, Jim.
Can get the doc cam.
Anytime Jim's up, a lot of money gets spent.
Oh,
You're welcome.
He did, that was a you're welcome face.
We're introducing a project tonight for some intersection improvements at 161st Street and Hickman Road. The scope of this project is very similar in nature to a project that's under contract a little bit further to the west. We went through that assessment process a year and a half ago at Berkshire and Waco. So you may remember that. The scope of the project itself here is again very similar and includes the installation of traffic signals at the intersection, some ADA improvements to trails and sidewalks, and some median improvements as well. The need for the project at this time arose with the development in the northeast quadrant there with the Fairway store going in. As part of that site plan approval process, the DOT was a party of that and had some required public improvements. One of those was obviously the installation of the signals themselves. The other that I want to point out was removing the median break at this access point here. That's the Tuffy's and Steakhouse, and then Wendy's and some other businesses in the strip mall. The completion of this project, that median will be closed per the DOT's median access agreements. And again, the aerial is old there. The church obviously is in place here in Fairway under construction, so some of the frontage roads have been connected, and that access point, the opposing access point, is constructed now. So again, at the completion of the project, both of those will act independently and be right in, right out only as per DOT requirements. The preliminary assessment process starts tonight. A little more information just included in the memo. We're working with Snyder and Associates on the plans on this one. Their cost estimate that's included in the assessment document is $793,000. Those costs for the assessment purposes will be split evenly, with 25% assigned to each of the 4 quadrants of the intersection. With that said, if you've looked at the schedule included in the document, where you will only be assessing two of the properties, those are the 2 development properties in the southeast and the northeast quadrants. Those development properties, will be served by the proposed improvements. If you look at switch then and look at that northwest quadrant where the existing residential is there, we will not be including them in the assessments. Those pre-existing residential properties will not be served by the proposed improvement. Basically what we're saying there is, absent the development in that area, the signals would not be needed. Those properties have been there for almost 25 years now. So we did not include them in the assessment. A couple of details there, just reminders on the assessment. One is an individual assessment cannot be greater than 25% of the property's value. So there is a deficiency on the Crate property here in the southeast quadrant. The assessed value there, or the assessor's valuation there, is $340,000. So 25%, the most we could assess is $85,000. So the difference between the 25% and the 25% of the total project cost and the 25% of the assessed value, that difference is a conditional deficiency and is shown in the assessment document. Also, we'll be doing a final assessment at the completion of the project. And again, just as a reminder, those final assessment amounts may be less, but cannot be greater than the preliminary amounts.
And Jim, is that Crate property built out?
No, that's an existing residence there. There has been, Carol Crate did pass last year, so they're represented by the estate attorney there. There has been a little bit of development interest there to start out with. So we're kind of monitoring that and looking at that, but we want to at least have this assessment in place as leverage depending on what happens there moving forward.
Creates the liability on the parcel.
Yeah.
The schedule moving forward, your actions tonight set the public hearing to consider the resolution of necessity at your second meeting in March. The city clerk will be sending out notifications to those 2 properties in the meantime. We'll also be working with Snyder on the final design. We're anticipating a mid-April letting and hoping to set a public hearing for your second meeting in April to award that work. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question for Jim? Not, we're ready to move on to the action items, preliminary resolution.
I'll move the preliminary resolution pursuant to section 384.42.
Second.
Motion is second on item A. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 5-0.
Move item B.
We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a reluctant second on the resolution. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 5-0. And then we need to set a public hearing.
Move item C. Setting a public hearing for 3/23/2023 at 6 p.m.
Second.
Motion is second on item C. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote?
Seems if I read them, he is warmer to it than just saying letter B.
Apparently. Clerk, please post that vote. It passes by a vote of 5-0. Thank you. Doug, I think you're up next on sidewalks.
We take a break.
Well,
When Jim comes up, he spends a lot of money. When Doug comes up, he spends a lot of time.
I think Jim has spent all of the money. I'm hoping there's a few breadcrumbs left for us to deal with sidewalks within the city. What we want to talk to you about tonight is the city sidewalk and shared use path maintenance policy for the city. As you're well aware, sidewalks, bike paths are critically important for the neighborhoods that we rely on with our community. We have a little over 150 miles of sidewalks, bike paths within the city. Quite a significant asset for the city. And the expectation is that those assets have a useful life in excess of 50 years, just like any other public utility would. So in order to ensure that the systems have longevity, maintenance is required, just like a street, just like a piece of pipe, water main, etc. Secondarily, there is or can be substantial liability associated with sidewalks and bike trails. The use of those facilities can become problematic if the facilities are not up to acceptable level of standard. So what we have had in the city of Clive is a long-standing policy associated with the maintenance and repair of these facilities. One, it is principally around ensuring that the facilities provide the adequate level of service, safety. But secondarily, it is a risk management protocol for the city to have the policy in place and then actively be engaged in that inspection and repair program itself. So we've had this for a very long time. Occasionally, we will come up with situations that need to be addressed because of the complexity of the system has changed over the years. We've added a lot more sidewalks. We've added wider sidewalks. We've added trails. We've added mailboxes and connectors and accessible ramps and things of this nature. So we haven't really addressed any modifications in the policy for over a decade now. But over the last couple of years, we've been having more and more trouble finding contractors that are able to service our needs in terms of the repairs to the sidewalks. And this past year, we actually had no contractors respond to our program needs. So with that kind of pause, if you will, in the program, it gave us an opportunity to rethink strategically how to deliver this service to the residents and do it in a way that's most efficient, both in terms of time and resource. So with that quick introduction, I'd be happy to answer big picture questions. Otherwise, I want to have Mark come up and talk to you about the proposed changes to the program.
Any questions for Doug? I think we're anxious to move to Mark.
Thanks, Doug. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Most of you know, I'm the code enforcement officer here for the city of Clive. We here. I wouldn't be doing my job if you weren't here, right? Or if you weren't mad at me, right. I wouldn't be doing my job. So tonight, I'm going to quickly discuss the proposed changes to the sidewalk shared use path and policy and the benefits we believe will be achieved by them. First of all, we'll discuss the timeline changes, which this is probably the biggest change we've made. Yeah, sorry. There it is. As Doug said, for the last 2 to 3 years, especially since COVID hit, it's very difficult for us to get a contractor. And when we do get a contractor, it might be just one. And the time we've got the one, it was 200% higher bid than the previous year. Basically, they were just saying, hey, we'll bid as high as we can. If we get it, we get it. If we don't, we don't. So Doug said, like we said, we need to revamp this. So the program timeline changes start with the sidewalk inspections will be done in September and October instead of May. And the main reason for this is to allow inspections in the slower part of the year
for staff. It gives me more time that time of the year, and then I can focus in the spring on all the other issues and the nuisances and things I deal with when the weather turns warm. So this really kind of spreads things out a little bit for us. It also provides the property owner now 7.5 months to plan for that repair, whereas traditionally it's been 45 days. I think that will be very nice as well. This also spreads out the timeline of the program, which benefits the property owners, like I just said. It benefits the city, like I just said. It gives me more time, quality time, where I'm not being having to deal with barking dogs, tall grass and weeds, things like that. I can really focus on that. And it also benefits the contractors as well. As we stretch this out even further, it gives them more of an opportunity to evaluate what their schedules are going to be like. The request for bids from contractors will be moved from January or from Jan to January rather than in May. And once again, we believe that the biggest issue there is if we move it to January, maybe their schedules aren't full and filled up already. Whereas in May, they're already like, man, this is a program that can be extensive. We really don't know how much it'll take. So a lot of them just are less likely to bid it, we believe, in May. So we're hopeful in January that we'll be able to catch a few more bidders. The deadline for the property owners for the repair will be moved to July, from July to May. It sounds like we're moving it, like making it tighter, but we're actually not. Once again, they're going to get notice in the fall and they'll have 7.5 months. And the reason we moved it to May is to allow the contractors a little bit more time during the program to get the work done. They were here. If we can do this and give them a little more time, hopefully we'll attract more bidders to do that as well. So the next modification is to,
Real quick.
Yeah.
Before we move off that.
Yeah.
I had a couple questions real quick. I mean, more time sounds, that's always appreciated.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about what Doug was saying about, kind of the liability that comes with these kind of trip hazards and things like that. Any concerns about that longer period causing that sort of increased potential liability, right? Especially during like the bad weather months, right?
Okay. So there is always going to be liability, but I think you're asking, is there a lot of liability for the city? Is there more because we're doing this? It is my belief that there's no state code that says you have this many days to get your sidewalk repaired. The state code does say they are liable for that if someone does get hurt. So as long as I believe, as long as we send notice, when we mark that sidewalk in the fall and paint it, hang a door tag, and then mail them their notice, as long as I believe, as long as they're notified at that time that there's a deficiency, it's on them. They can get it repaired in a week, 2 weeks, or wait for us to get our contractor. So I don't think that it extends liability to the city more than it already does now. Because like I said, it's not like we're saying, well, the state says 45 days, we don't have to worry about that. Let's extend that. It's just, we're just offering more reasonable time for them to do it.
And another, along that same line, any thoughts on, a lot of these deficiencies, they creep up over that freeze thaw cycle over the winter. So if you're doing inspections in the fall, right before that kind of hits, is there kind of a thought on what you do with kind of those borderline, the ones that aren't quite there yet?
So the bad news is if it does not hit our deficiency, like a 1 inch, if it's not 1 inch, we don't mark it.
Sure.
Realistically can't mark it because that's what our policy says. If I'm at a property that has a deficiency, I will always look to see if there's some that are close, because it doesn't make sense to paint one and know next year we're going to be back, or 4 years, and then they'll be yelling at me saying, well, why did you tell me that then?
Right.
So we are proactive in that aspect, but if there's one that's going to be close, we don't do anything about that. The freeze and thaw in the spring, it's still, especially in May, it's still moving a little bit. The ground is soft. I'm thinking we may catch more if the weather is getting colder and things are moving. But I think on both ends, fall and spring, I think they're both kind of moving still. So I think in the long run, in the end of the day, we're still going to catch as many as we did before, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and we're still doing the complaint driven as well, obviously. That's not even part of the program. Complaint driven is if, someone sees it, it grows during the summer or spring. We will send notice to them and they'll have 45 days to get that done. Does that answer everything?
Thank you.
So now we'll move to modification to the inspection procedures. I'm going to just put the zone map up there so everybody knows and can see it. These are our traditional 4 zones. I don't know, they're hard to see. Okay, so the modifications to the inspection procedures, there isn't a lot, but the city will now, we're going to clarify that the city will be responsible for sidewalk ramps and all associated expenses for the repairs. The city will also take on the responsibility of repairing cluster style mailbox pads and accessibility to them, although snow removal will still be the responsibility of the adjacent property owners. It's been a very difficult struggle for me for these items that is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And we've never addressed the cluster style mailboxes that are going up in all the new developments. Who's responsible for accessibility to those? It's in the right of way. So I've asked questions with our attorneys. Is there a liability with the city, even though we didn't build it or ask for it? Maybe we did, I don't know, sorry. But if there's a trip hazard there, is there a liability for us? And I think the general answer is probably. I mean, it just depends on what we can go to court. So since there is there's no guidelines there, I think their city, we're asking that the city be responsible for those items. And then when it comes to sidewalk ramps, it's kind of unfair in our belief to put that on the adjacent property owners because there's so much more involved now when you're replacing a sidewalk ramp. It's not simply concrete, it's truncated domes. It can be retaining walls. It can be 15 feet of concrete on both sides just to make them ADA compatible now. And I think that's very difficult to try to put that on a property owner if there's just a 1-inch trip hazard there that needs to be replaced, because they won't let you just fix a portion. If you have to fix it, it has to be brought back to the current standards now, which can cost thousands and thousands of dollars. The inspectors will work within a designated zone until 100 properties are identified needing repair or replacement. Currently, right now, we just go in a 4-year zone. We do entire zone 1, 2, 3, 4 every year. We feel that by moving to a number, we'll be in zone 1. When we hit 100 properties, that's our deadline. That's where we stop. Whether we're done with that or not, that's where we're going to quit. It has been a good average for us on all of these zones. Every year is about 100. That makes it easier for our contractors to work and plan for, and it makes it easier for the city to budget for. If there's anything left in the budget, we will have a little extra money to do proactive work on maybe ramps and mailbox pads and things like that. The following year, we will continue where we left off in zone 1 and we'll move into zone 2 until we hit 100 properties and so forth.
So for a full cycle refresh, it sounds like it might take a little longer since.
So like the average has been 100. So hopefully it won't extend it too much more, but you're right. As zone 4 grows, it may be 6 years until we get to the next one instead of 4, correct. But once again, yeah, the liability issue, we're always taking proactive complaints. We still have a program in place and the state doesn't require a certain amount of time. You need to look at a certain sidewalk in each zone, so. Staff will recommend grinding and patching on rare occasions as an alternative to full replacement. We've never done that before. We believe that there are times that just a small trip hazard or a 1-inch, the panel's in great shape. It's hard for me, it's hard for the city to go after the homeowner to say, you need to replace that panel, you got a trip hazard. When the rest of the panel is in great shape and they can grind it, it doesn't really affect the sidewalk panel. And as long as they do it the way we are asking them to do it, we believe that that's a safe alternative way to do it, save some money for the property owners. We also allow small areas of patching. Sometimes you have spalls on concrete, and before it's been tear it out, you need to replace it. We believe in rare occasions, patching would work as an alternative that would extend the life of that concrete. And once again, that's something that the inspector, me, I would approve. So when I mark that sidewalk, when I send them notice, it will say if you're allowed to patch or grind or not. So I'll make it easy on them that they won't have questions with that.
Mud jacking?
Yeah, mud jacking is certainly available. We allow that now as well. Correct. Yep. And that's also on my report. You can mud jack it, you can replace it. And then in rare occasions, if we approve it, you might be able to just patch it. We won't allow a ramp style patch to get rid of a 1-inch trip hazard, but we will allow it for pockets and holes. Staff proposes to update the amount of shared use path for which a property owner is responsible for to a 50-50 cost share. Currently, they're responsible for 4 feet of sidewalk on a shared use path because traditionally it's always been an 8-foot shared use trail. Well, now we're kind of moving to 10 foot and our standard sidewalks in new developments are now 5 feet. So we believe by moving to a 50-50, the worst case is they're probably looking at a 5-foot cost of replacement on a 10-foot section of trail, if that makes sense. The city does not anticipate the proposed changes to adversely impact the quality and safety of the sidewalk program, nor having a negative effect on the current budget allocation of the program, which is $25,000 a year.
So real quick, backing up to that 50-50 cost share, what does that mean? I know it's hard to put like a dollar figure on it because it's subject to kind of the grade or a condition of that, but I mean, do we expect an overall increase for homeowners then?
No, the contractor still bids on, so our sidewalk shared use, our shared use paths are 5 inches thick. They actually have a bid item for 5-inch concrete. So they will bid $6.25 a square foot. So the homeowner and the city will know exactly what it's going to cost to replace. Let's say it's a 10 by 10 square. The homeowner will be responsible for half of that 5 by 5 square or 5 by 5 portion, 5 by 10, sorry. So they will know exactly what it's going to cost them when we send that notice.
So, but I guess compared to the old standard of like the 4 foot, it will be an increase compared to that old standard.
It will be, yes.
Depends on the width of the shared use path.
Correct.
Because many of the old ones were 8 feet wide. So 4 feet of 8 is still 50%.
Right, and
it's the change in the widths of both the trails and the sidewalk, rather than having multiple schedules. We just evened it out and set 50%.
Okay, so it sounds it just makes it proportional across the board without having to get overly prescriptive then.
Correct.
Because we also have 4-foot sidewalks in older parts of the community, just the regular sidewalks and 5-foot in newer developments.
So there's always one odd one, right? And that I talk about all the time behind my house that goes that takes you right into the traffic and onto the railroad tracks, all right? And you pray as you go down. That thing's probably 2 feet wide. I mean, that is like, who owns that? That goes through there? Is that the property owner?
Ultimately, yes, it is the adjoining property owner.
Which is part of us, I think, on the bottom. Part rail, part 2 neighbors, right? And it's 4 feet. It can't be more than 4 feet.
We have virtually no sidewalks less than 4 feet. 4 feet's the minimum standard. It's been the case for a very long time. So yes, older sidewalks kind of get shrunk by grass and other types of things along the edges. But principally speaking, we're talking about 4-foot sidewalk.
That's a shared. Okay, and that will be a 50-50 split?
No, sidewalk, that would be a sidewalk. And that is each property owner, if it, was in front of your house or in front of your house or whoever's house, that is your responsibility.
That's classified as a sidewalk, that access to the greenbelt? I call it an access. It's an access to
that
train
particular,
engine.
yeah, Yes, that particular facility, again, I think we would need to evaluate it a little bit because it may be the cities,
Okay,
100% the cities.
yeah,
I can't be definitive without digging into that a bit.
okay, all right.
There's a lot of those sidewalks and trails that trailheads that go to the green belt and so forth. And I think some of those we need to look at, and that's where some of that extra money might be able to go to where we could manage those.
A lot of those types of facilities historically have not been reviewed because they haven't been attributable to a public or private property per se. It's been simply a likely city facility that isn't necessarily part of this program. We are suggesting with the revamp of this, that regardless of whether it's public or privately owned, we're gonna take a look at it. So
Okay.
this facility you're talking about, when we're in that zone, would be one that we would be evaluating, and if there's needed repairs or updates, it would get addressed.
Okay. Is it too much to ask that 100% of the city's facilities get looked at on top of the 100 properties?
That was one of the main reasons why we're stopping at 100 as well, to give us more time to look at our sidewalks, even in front of City Hall right here, not in the right of way even,
Right.
but stairs, things like that. It just gives us
Okay,
more opportunities to be able to get that done.
Okay.
When we're doing that many properties and everything there's a lot to do, and there just wasn't a lot of extra time left to do those things. So yeah, that's part of the idea is let's stop at 100. We know where we're going to be there. That'll give us a lot more time and hopefully extra money in the budget as well to be able to look at the other stuff.
okay. Thanks.
A through E.
Oh, yeah, I was just showing this. We actually updated this and put some pictures on there, which we never had before, of deficiencies. That was Doug's idea. It was a great idea. That goes out to the homeowners as well, so that the property owners, so that they know exactly what it means, like B and so forth. So
That everything?
that is everything. So yeah,
So what we're looking for is a resolution.
Move to resolution.
Second.
Motion and a second on the resolution. Further discussion. Seeing none, would the council please vote? And would the clerk please post that vote?
Yes, I got kicked out.
Yes. I'm refreshing. We must have MediaCom.
That passes by a vote of 5-0. Thank you, Mark.
thank you.
Smart. All right, now we'll move into reports. Pete.
Little Walnut Creek Sewer Project. Trees start going down next week.
Who?
Pre-cons on Monday. Our staff will be well represented. There's been extensive work over the last 5 days, making sure everybody's on the same page about trees that have been identified for protection, and also to see further if there are others that should be on that list. And there's been some good truing up that needs to be done. But even with all of that proactive work around the trees, assume that there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of upset folks, because in the construction easement area on the north side of the creek near the existing trail, a lot of stuff is going to be going down. Because we don't want to surprise people, I continue making those one-on-one phone calls to the folks who live specifically in that area from our border with Urbandale to Alice's Road. There are two smaller subdivision circles there and one homeowners association that are going to be really, really close to where that construction area is at. And so I haven't been able to reach everybody, but I have been able to reach many. We've got 40 people now on our email distribution list getting updates. And tomorrow we'll also be, I'll be working with Waukee to get a press release out. If we don't sort of determine that tomorrow gives us the best odds of landing a media hit, we'll push it to Monday, but we can't go any further than that because trees could start going down as early as Tuesday.
Perhaps they'll be focused on Des Moines Golf and Country Club.
Maybe so.
Lots of work with our friends up at state legislature. I'm not going to go over all of them but if there are specific questions, Matt and I can field some of those as you have them here as we're going through our reports. A lot of work this week on videos. So we've started to share our newest testimonial video around Greenbelt Landing to continue the momentum there. There'll be some additional video work around Greenbelt Landing with some very special awards, grants that are coming to the city for that project. Our recruiting video is down, I think, to its final cut. So I look forward to sharing that with everybody, along with your appreciation video that we shot earlier as well. I've got that down to a final cut that Matt and I are reviewing. So next week, I expect both of those to be finished and ready to share. They complement each other very well. A lot of similar themes. Potholes. Through January and up to this week, roughly, we have had over 280 hours from our public works team already out filling potholes, which equates to 15.5 tons of patch material placed on Clive streets. That work's going to be heavy and ongoing as we keep moving through this freeze thaw cycle. So congratulations and thank you to all the public works folks for getting out there and doing it. If you, Matt tomorrow will be sending out those stats I just shared along with the link to the pothole map so that you can see all of the big areas where our teams proactively have gone out and also the spot areas that have been called in. It's a map that shows a whole lot of hard work underway.
Pete, I've seen a lot of, like, I'll call them partially filled pothole. It almost seems like they were filled and then they kind of eroded a little bit on like one side or the other. Is that something that is going to be on, like, addressed in some of those maps for some of the more problematic areas? Or
the colors on the map don't get down to that level of, we had to go back and hit it again.
Right.
It's not unusual for this patch material to work its way back out if you have the tough conditions to move it back out.
This is the cold patch, right? That kind of is meant to be temporary just to get us through the kind of the winter, right?
Well, and I want to defer to Jeff, but or maybe the public works folks here can nod or shake your heads vigorously if I get this wrong. Pros and cons of different materials. An asphalt patch that goes in is one gooey mess when we've got the opportunity. If it comes out, it all comes out, leaving a big hole. Whereas cold patch, one of its advantages is that if something fails, the entire patch may not fail. The mastic material has its pros and cons as well. It can be a little bit more difficult to deal with and limited window of time when we can go and apply it and when we can get our hands on it. So I don't think that we can uniformly say that one material is better than the other. They're all designed to lengthen the life of that street and get as much value as we can out of it before a much more expensive fix is necessary with a full depth patch, or even a complete reconstruction of large sections of street.
Coal patches are our only option this time of year.
Right.
We don't have any other material options. And a lot of what you'll see happens with, like, that example is our plows. So one thing that's really been hard this winter is we've had a lot of freeze thaw, right? It's nice to see the snow melt, but that also is a detriment to our streets and is going to pop, a patch that we might have done a month ago between, two cold cycles and it melted. We'll patch it, but then we'll have a snow blade will go across it if it isn't just fully all the way down and pop it right out because we plow our streets pretty good. So especially with that breaker blade that's underneath the plow. So that's part of why you can see some of those partial ones pop out is because our blades got it.
okay, sure.
Call them in when you see them and our crews will get on them.
Okay.
anything else, Pete?
No, sir.
Free gun.
So I think Matt teed up that he's going to talk about SSB 1125. So I'll take the more fun side of the DART report. DART had an event with Clive Library over the weekend. It was a big success. There was like 80 or 90 people there. We actually had to run the bus 3 times and I had to read the book multiple times because we just couldn't get everybody in one room.
Cool.
So it's very, very cool, very good event. So kudos to the library and DART folks for that, organizing it, putting together. We ran out of goodie bags. That's how many people we had. So that was fantastic.
And do you want to tell us the book you read?
Yeah. So I read Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. And the pigeon is very dramatic. So you gotta play it up, right? So, but the kids seem to like it. Nobody booed me off the stage. So
Did they let you drive the bus?
they did not. So I guess I was the pigeon.
John has driven that bus.
I have driven that bus.
But yeah, that's it for a report tonight.
Thank you. Ted.
Okay, Icon Water Trails, the Scott Avenue portion of the project, which is basically kind of the active recreational area with the whitewater and all of that. That construction is just starting. And a lot of that is going to be dam mitigation and things of that nature. But there's also going to be, once again, trees coming down and all that. So that construction is starting. I think we're going to have kind of a groundbreaking of some sorts here within the next month that I'll be attending as well. So that's exciting. That's actually getting moving. That's the biggest kind of most visible aspect of the various projects within Icon. Floor Drive has they're working on the design for that. The Floor Drive portion is more of the passive recreation, the beaches and fishing piers and things of that nature. And so that's in design right now. So it is moving forward. The marketing team at Icon, the kind of preliminarily called some of their initiatives Icon 2.0. They're going to come up with a better brand for it. But basically, you should start seeing a lot more public-facing advertising and marketing to make the water trails much more publicly known and branded, so that as these things start to come online, the public will be much more aware of it and have a brand recognition to that. So be on the lookout for that. That should be starting here soon. And there's 14, I think, active projects around the region that will all be branded with that. So
Good.
It's not just limited to downtown.
I'm trying to envision what it would look like to break ground on a water trail.
Yeah,
I'm
not sure either, but I'm invited, so I'll let you know.
Throw the shovel in the water.
Yeah,
That's what you
something like
do.
that. Yeah.
having trouble with that.
Maybe
Ted.
he's just cutting down a tree. I don't know. but-
Ted jumps in the water.
Well, very good. Just a few things here. One, the business record has come out with their 40 under 40, and Srikant is on the list. So congratulations and kudos.
You're way over there.
How many months under the wire?
I think 6.5 or 7.
Okay, well,
Just barely.
just
Yeah.
great.
Thank you.
Susan and I were at a civility summit yesterday morning, and I'll let Susan
Fight
talk.
breakout.
Pardon?
Did a fight breakout.
Fortunately not. Fortunately not. It was a very good session, actually. And Susan may talk to some of the points there, but there's really a commitment to continuing nonpartisanship in council and school board races and a number of other things that were covered. I attended a meeting today at the World Food Prize building. Ambassador Quinn, Representative Feenstra, and Miller Meeks were there presenting, talked about ag and other issues. The primary benefit, though, was in networking. I spoke with Sue Woody, who's the director of Des Moines Public Library. And I see Richard is not here, but she just wanted to let me know what a wonderful job we had done with the Harbach Center and the library resources that we were providing there. And she was tickled pink that her library was able to offer us a real deal on the shelving and other stuff.
You got a really good
Richard's
deal.
talked about that before. I mean, it was like they were giving it to us. It was
Pretty much, yeah.
pretty
It was
much. So that,
$1,500 for all that shelving.
Oh,
which
yeah.
If you bought that in the market, would probably be 18, 20 grand.
oh yeah, yeah. So anyway, so
Excess.
that was great. The other thing I wanted to mention is somewhat of a follow-up to the Civility Summit yesterday is after that and at the meeting today, I talked to Robert Palmer with the league and with Jay Myers and then with others as well. We're looking at the possibility of sponsoring a civility workshop for council members in advance of the November election to get ahead of it and get everyone on board with what a campaign should look like and how you should treat your opponents and so forth. So just a heads up, we're working on that. Again, the partnership seems to be in, the league seems to be in, the Ray Center with Scott Racker is very much interested. So hopefully we'll have something on that coming up soon, but I want to give you a heads up on that. So That's all I have, and I'll pass it over to you,
Well, to
Susan.
piggyback on John's comment about the civility workshop, I'd really like to credit our mayor for having started our process of starting each meeting with talking about the character pillars. And that was an action item that came out of that discussion earlier this week of something that would be encouraged. And I felt good that Clive was doing that already. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
And the only other thing I'd report is I'd mentioned that the Women in Government group was getting kicked off again. That Councilwoman Linda Westergaard and I were spearheading that. We had a session at the Des Moines Airport earlier this week and pretty good attendance, but be aware of how tough the parking is out there right now. So
At the airport?
at the airport. So it isn't even spring break yet. There just aren't enough parking spaces. They're really hoping as spring break comes on us that there isn't any plan for snow because they do have a few spaces blocked off as snow dump locations. But they're kind of worried about what happens if they let people park there and a snowstorm does come through. But allow plenty of time, maybe do the reservation at CAC or somewhere if you're planning on flying out. It is notably difficult. I've been experiencing it since summer, going out for some of the workshops, but it really is something to warn people about right now. And the airport is planning to come out with some public service announcements about it, but just in my own public service to all of you, if you're flying out, be aware. Thanks.
Well said. My wife had that same experience, waiting half hour for a shuttle. I think it was a gray lot.
Yeah.
Because they were all full before they got there, and it was cold. She was not happy. I'm looking for Eric. Did we lose Eric?
No, Councilman Klein's still on the meeting.
Well, Eric, do you have a report for us?
Just to let you know, it is a balmy 14 below degrees here up in beautiful Bismarck. And no, Mayor, I don't have a report tonight.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Somehow it's reassuring to get that rather than get someone from Florida. and say,
Right.
Better about that.
That's right.
Michael.
Yeah, brief, and if Matt wants to expand on it, but I had a WRA meeting. They approved their budget, amongst other things that they discussed, some of the upcoming costs. Matt, what was the years on that large number out? I can't remember, but they were.
In terms of the WRA,
Yeah,
WRF.
Yeah. They're talking $1.2 billion in spending in the next, let's see, I want to say, it's several, might even be that 20-30 year, but there are some serious overhauls of the entire facility. A lot of things that make sense, but they need space, and it's configured for 1980, I think is when it was built.
It was
1982.
it was configured for 1982 flow. Well, estimates that were done in 1982 of the Metro's growth. It is these improvements would get us basically to 2060, and it's about $1.1 billion. Now, I know that sounds like a massive number when you think about it in terms of how much that the WRA spends in improvements on an average year.
In an average consent item.
Yeah, right. About 30 to 40 million a year today. And thinking about, over a 40-year time frame, construction inflation, all those things you can get to that number. It isn't illogical to get to the $1.1 billion number, I guess is what I'm saying, but that includes conveyance too. So the facility itself, the treatment cost, as they call it, about 865 million. And then another and some of this is carryover from the existing facility plan.
2012.
Yeah, the 2012 facility plan. And so we're really getting to a point where, and we knew this day was coming, that, the Metro is growing. And these are just, I give the WRA staff credit. They really do a good job of planning ahead and, showing that this is a 40-year number, but it's going to be something that we're going to need to plan for and rates and try to make it economical. And at the same time, also enhancing, I think that was a big part of the presentation, enhancing the revenue opportunities with the facility, with the spreading of, the end product, the sludge, that gets dried out. And then apparently I was surprised to hear that we have farmers that are on like a waiting list for that product to spread on their fields. So that's a
So
product.
Waste receives that. We're first on that list. We receive it. It lowers our fertilizer bill by about half by bringing that in. So it is a great addition. It may change as they need space, if they have that in the future or not. And it's another thing Metro's looking at bringing in-house for composting, but we're in talks with them at this point. But
The biogas facility that generates revenue, and then the phosphorus recovery facility as well.
that biogas was 8 million,
Right.
if I remember right. So it's
Making-
really done well.
And that's starting to now pay itself off here very quickly. And then we have kind of, the finance committee has proposed various plans on how that excess revenue can be used to offset debt expenses. The small CIP, which is kind of the ongoing every year capital projects that aren't indebted, could we use that revenue to offset that? Because that's a quicker hit on communities' rates versus, debt service, which is over time. So they definitely are putting their plans together and doing a good job of presenting it to all the various stakeholders.
Got a lot of city managers sitting in Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So it was good because of all the numbers. Oh, there was one more thing on WRA. Yep, for now, I'll think about it.
I think they're getting close on awarding. I think they have awarded a designer for the parallel sewer that'll be coming through the green belt. Snyder and Associates is the designer for that, and our staff is and Councilmember McCoy will be involved in terms of discussions with Scott Hutchins down at the WRA on what are some mutually beneficial things that can happen. We know the parallel sewer needs to go through. Could potentially impact trails, things like that. But these are things that the WRA also has to put back and replace. So think about it in a way of how we used the Waukee sewer opportunity to maybe look at ways that we could do restoration and other improvements. We'll be having some active conversations on that, as that first segment is scheduled for 2025, which would be west of the interstate. So it'd be a smaller stretch, and then it'll go up through Urbandale. The Grimes connection is what's kind of pushing that, but the sewer to the west is smaller. So the choke point for the flows is going to come faster west and then east of the interstate 26, 27.
He's really thought that out well too. He's put a small committee together and he's given Clive, I think, 3 spots, 2 or 3 spots. I'm on it. Matt's on it.
Jeff May.
Jeff May's on it. And so we will get a lot of say in how that happens.
Mhm.
So the last thing on that, I'd like to talk about, Sarah Kravatsky brought it up, BJ Giovanetti brought it up, I brought it up. We're looking at a lot of projections to 2060, but what we aren't taking into consideration is the infiltration of water in storm and wet days, right? You look at 700 million gallons, I think it was, per day, is your average. On wet days, I'm going to get close on these numbers. It's 280 million gallons a day on wet days. So you're jumping 200 million gallons on rain days and wet days. And that's almost very close.
Yeah, you're close.
Off
I got it in front.
rain infiltration. And so we need to do better at fixing. We talk about soil restoration and other things. We could really lower our flow by doing some simple things. We're talking about putting a fund together at the WRA. And then, the one thing I heard, which was a little concerning, was the reason it's come up before. It's been shot down very quick. I asked the why, and the why was very plainly told to us that the cities were fighting over who would get the benefit of the repairs and the flow. right? And so afterwards, we had a very short discussion about that as they asked me, since I was pretty vocal about it. How would you even propose it? I said, we'd have to think about it, put a committee together, but it's as easy as if you spend money in X town, it lowers, let's spread the savings out, or everybody gets a proportionate percentage of the pot. You take it back to your city and you do the projects you can that year, or you build it up over 3 to 5. It's not rocket science. Let's not do it because y'all are fighting over dollars. And that's exactly what's been happening for the last 20 years is everybody's fighting over who gets the projects rather than let's just do the damn projects, right? So I think we'll get somewhere on that, get some cooler heads there. And that's been pushed hard by the current chair, which is Sarah. And again, myself as the vice chair and then EJ. So that's something I think the city needs to think about in the future. That's it.
All right. Yeah. So the one thing I wanted to circle back with the council on was the DART franchise fee discussion that's included in Senate Study Bill 1125. So that did pass through subcommittee on Tuesday. 1124, which deals with some other issues, actually went through the Ways and Means Committee earlier this week as well. But 1125 speaks specifically to allowing, at least at this time, and then there was some proposed amendments to 1125 that we haven't seen yet in terms of what changes are being incorporated. Both 1124 and 1125 have amendments. These are the big property tax and other taxes lost and other things, bills that the Senate's working on. But at least as of what we saw, 1125 has it for the franchise fee to go to 7.5% just for the city of Des Moines. Essentially, it's got a population limitation on it. And the question that we had last week of would the other city from Des Moines, would other cities been interested in? I know I've shared a one pager that Des Moines and DART had put together and had a conversation with some Des Moines staff last week. And I know the DART executive committee also had a discussion regarding this, and it sounded like from the executive committee, they weren't at a point where there was enough non-Des Moines communities ready to sign on and having that opened up. What I would say is, I know as the council discussion 2 weeks ago, with the desire to have, we would consider the 7.5% if it was opened up a little bit more than just property tax relief for public transit. The feeling that I get is that is a non-starter with the legislature, that the only thing that they're going to consider is dollar for dollar property tax reduction for that additional 2.5%.
But for transport.
For public transit, basically offsetting our debts, the property tax levy for DART that our residents pay to DART. So that is, so my question back to the council essentially is if that is what the deal is, or the only option, I know at first blush, there wasn't support for that consideration, and Des Moines is asking all of the cities is if it was for that straight relief. And again, it would be voluntary for any city to want to go to 7.5%. You wouldn't have to do it, but at least it would amend the state code to give cities the option to do that. But again, if you go above 5, which we're at 5 today, which all goes towards road rehab, at 2.5%, if you go up 1% or all of the 2.5%, any of those dollars would have to go to directly offset the DART levy in Clive. Now, what I would offer to you is any revenue diversification that the state legislature is willing to consider for cities, I wouldn't necessarily say no to, because there's always the possibility of a discussion in the future of opening up the usage of those monies. Getting it raised to 7.5% is probably the hardest part of this. So anyway, food for thought, but I wanted to get a circle back with the council on that just to get a sense, because the city of Des Moines is asking all of the cities kind of their feeling on it.
I don't understand that offset part. Can you explain?
So so our franchise fee is 5%. It generates, let's just say for easy numbers, about $1.5 million a year, roughly. So if what the code would allow for is any city that wants to go above 5%, whether you want to go to 6% or the full 7.5%, any dollars that are generated by that, we would pay to DART, and DART would reduce the property tax levy that they levy and to our residents in our community. So our levy, the DART levy is about 55 cents, 54 cents per thousand. So it would essentially drop that and drop all of our residents' property tax levy, residents and businesses
But
in Clive.
under the new formulation, assuming that stays in place, our levy would go down.
It's already going down over time.
Right.
It's not going to go to zero, but it's going to go down. This would make it go down faster.
Because of your past commissioner.
Yeah. Which I'll take full credit.
So that's essentially, so if you, let's say
And
you
this is
decided
Franchise fee.
this would be franchise fee on utility bills. So if 1%, generates of roughly 200,000, that 54 cents generates probably about $1 million in Clive based on our tax base.
Personally, I am in favor of taking advantage of the franchise fee because of the opportunity to have nonprofit entities contribute.
Widens the tax base, and Councilmember McElhaney asked me the question earlier today is whether or not franchise schools pay the franchise fee. I think they do, but I have asked the question to the superintendent to confirm that, because I know that was
They
the
used
question
to,
you had.
unless they got exempted.
And I don't think they did, but I wanted to confirm and have the superintendent look at his bill
Yeah.
for the Clive facilities
The
and
research-
the West Des Moines School District.
The
Anyway.
research I did, it looks like they do pay the franchise fee too.
Yeah. So we
That
wanted
they
to
do?
confirm that. Yeah. So yes, you would have a broader tax base that would apply to versus the property tax base. So anyway,
But-
welcome any direction or comments the council might
I
have.
think the
on
only
that.
thing I would reiterate is it doesn't obligate us to raise it.
No,
It just gives us the option, and we don't have to do a full 2.5% right out the gate. It just gives us more flexibility.
and it's a simple council vote to raise it. It doesn't require a referendum or anything.
And it's offset 1-to-1, right?
Yes.
Which I don't understand where the growth is for DART.
Yeah, I was wondering what's their.
If it's an offset 1-to-1, if I give a penny on franchise and I take property taxes down a penny, where's the growth?
That's what I wonder.
How does that help?
So Des Moines has talked about this and they are focused on that in the sense of their situation where they're at their max. So what their understanding is or how they're trying to get any amendments worded is to allow, because it doesn't serve any purpose if that's the case. But for Des Moines, at least, it'll give them the way, that'll be their funding source to basically above and beyond what they're paying at the cap, because they're paying above their 90-cent cap with other revenues right now, that it can be a replacement for that. So for us, we're not in that same situation that Des Moines is at the cap, using other funds to buy down to the 90
They're
cents.
the only one.
I think it would.
They're the
affect
only
West-
one right now.
I thought West Des Moines would also get affected too.
So, but West Des Moines is not at the cap. Their levy is going up
Right.
with Des Moines because of the tier
I
system.
thought they hit maybe I'm misremembering. I thought they did hit the cap in the projections.
They will hit the cap and several others will. I think, is Windsor Heights at the cap? Yeah,
They were
Windsor Heights
close.
is at the cap as well, but then you don't put any more in, right? You're at the cap. So what Des Moines is having to do because of the new structure
Right,
is the rest of the cities are saying, if you want DART, you need to fund it further, right? So they're putting in their ride share parking ramp money at 100% back into DART, where most people on that commission now say riders, the proportion of riders should pay, right? And the city of Des Moines has the highest, but it's like a 70-30, and that Des Moines should pay more than any other city.
Yeah, and
That's the fight inside the commission.
I stand corrected on this. I've got the one pager and it has the better language. So what Des Moines is proposing is amend the language to include all DART member communities and amend the language to ensure the commission has maximum flexibility in how the additional revenue is used. So what it sends is that additional revenue has to be for public transit. So it doesn't necessarily, for DART's purposes, have to be a dollar for dollar reduction. But I think that would also be up to the member community to decide. So, for example, if you're going to raise it, I would advise you would expect DART to lower your property tax levy. by the equivalent amount. Now Des Moines in a different situation because of what we just described. They need that flexibility because they're at the cap.
Matt, is it also sort of accurate to say that Des Moines has acknowledged that this doesn't solve the bigger DART funding question?
Correct.
There's still much that has to be sorted out from their perspective. And certainly that's been the consensus on this council as well.
It solves a short midterm issue.
Very short.
And but it does resolve, at least the way I understand it, Des Moines' contention that when something needed to happen, if they were going to continue to agree to be above the 90 cents. It still doesn't address the service side of it.
I spoke to a Des Moines staff member that told me that this doesn't solve.
Yeah.
Really, there's 3 to 4 places in this DART issue that unless all of them get solved, there may be 3 or 4, maybe more cities that drop, more cities that already have dropped. And Des Moines is saying, throwing their hands. I mean, you've still got to deal with a $60 million garage that is now 98 million. I call it 100 and they get mad, but it's $98 million garage that it went up from 67 or something when it was first proposed, right? And nobody knows how it's going to get built. On top of that, there's a whole bunch of other problems that the city of Des Moines has to solve. And in the meantime, there are 3 or 4 strong cities that are saying, unless you solve them quickly, we're out. And we've already seen 3 cities that dropped since the new governance. They're small.
Yeah.
I mean,
Carlisle, Elkhart,
yeah,
Oak City,
yeah, all of them.
one other one, all of them. Yep.
And now you're talking Grimes, Ankeny, right? And I don't blame some of it, like a Grimes. They don't get much. There's a bus that goes to Walmart. You know?
Milwaukee is not in DART.
So anyways, DART is a Shrikant's opportunity. He's reading books and making.
So do I get the sense that open to the flexibility, again, it's optional to the council? Okay, that's all I'm looking for. And to final point on the property tax piece, I'll share some communication that's gone out here recently between the league, the Iowa Mayors Association, and then the Iowa City County Managers Association about forming some groups related to property tax reform, asking for volunteers. I have volunteered myself from the Iowa CMA side of things. Also, there's some other informal conversations that are occurring in terms of what are some key principles that we can agree to and understand that reform is coming in some form or fashion, and how can cities start to put proposals out there that are going to be meeting some of the intents of what the majority party would like to see. And I would tell you, in at least the 20 years that I've been getting familiar with this and working on this issue, it seems like the conversation has really shifted to understanding that something's coming and we need to be a part of that conversation and not just saying no, no, no. So I think that's shifting. And I think there's a lot of good, positive conversation that is really starting. Whether that process, that the more formal process that the 3 big groups are looking at is going to be timely enough for this session, I don't know. I know there's other informal conversations that are also happening too, that are probably more focused on this session and what might or may not happen. So we will see. I just wanted to make the council aware of that.
Do you think you're in a position to be able to say no to the local option sales tax proposal in the Senate?
I mean, I wouldn't want, I mean, from a city of Clive perspective, I still think, at least in its current form, I would advise the council, we should be of the perspective that our voters voted for a specific revenue purpose statement on how those funds are to be used. That vote wasn't that long ago. We have some very committed, that those dollars are very committed, particularly has a substantial debt obligation against the portion of those revenues with the public safety facility. In its current form, I don't think we would be overly supportive of that. I'm just speaking on behalf of Clive. I wouldn't want to speak for any other communities. I think there continues to be skepticism on whether or not really with the mechanics of that bill, of whether or not there's really going to be that revenue fully replaced. And in my 20 years, I'm always going to be nervous when the state wants to take over a revenue that a local government has been utilizing, because
What's even the suggestion of how they replace the 3/8 that they're scooping off for another purpose to come back here? There isn't anything. So, I mean, I think we should be worried about the 5/8, but we know the 3/8 is gone.
Well, and there's provisions in that bill that has the general fund backfilling and making us whole.
Oh,
But how long is that going? Again, it goes back to how long is that going to last? So at this time, I think there's, and I even saw as we listened to some of the subcommittees, I think there's acknowledgement on behalf of the senator, especially the senator leading it, is that these aren't perfect bills, but this is going to be how we continue the conversation forward. I still think there's pretty good disagreement between the House and the Senate on these reforms, and that's a pretty big bridge, gap to bridge right now. So whether that happens in this session, I don't know, but something's coming at some point. And we'll, I just know some processes starting to fire up on how we be a part of that conversation.
From a timing standpoint, we reach the first funnel at the end of next week. So it narrows the conversation, but not when it's related to these tax bills. They will be with us because there's interest, and also just because they get special protection from funnels.
All right. So I would figure next week's going to be pretty focused on policy bills, because they'll want to get what they can get through before the funnel on Friday. And then we'll be back to the tax discussion in March.
What's that entertainment district idea that's moving? That allows.
I know that's one that Representative Losi, if I'm saying that correctly, from Bondurant he's been pushing that for a couple of years. I think he got it out of the House last year, but the Senate didn't approve it. It is kind of like I don't know all the details. I haven't read through the details of the bill. What I was familiar with when it was ran last year was more kind of related to what we've seen with some of these big improvement districts where you can divert sales tax to, I don't know what the revenue diversion is. I haven't read that far into the bill, but it's for like big venues, big substantial facilities, and how a city can make sure that they can set up almost like a SMIT, like a downtown district is set up, but specifically for entertainment districts. But again, that's my very high level read of the bill. I haven't read the details.
Tyre Hickman is entertainment district.
It's just,
86th Street.
you know, they've enabled it before for things like the racetrack in Newton, that kind of thing. And it is a sales tax thing, but it looks like cities would be able to set it up without having to get approval. So I thought we should pay attention to that. If it gives us an option to pull from sales tax that they're probably looking to steal.
They don't
Right.
get this year. They're gonna get.
That's all I have here.
That's all you've got.
Yep, that's all I've got.
Any correspondence, Matthew? Anything else for the good of the order? Hearing and seeing none, we'll adjourn at 8:49.